Episode 2.
Episode 2.
Goal setting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if have we settled on a title. I named it goal setting in the temporary file, but I thought about doing should we do questions? Something like how to set a goal and make sure you never fail a goal again. And I thought that could be really good for SEO because I know people are Googling how to set a goal and make sure that I never fail a goal again. I think a lot of people are
verbatim typing that in.
Yeah, they're doing the quotes,
Yeah.
on both sides of it. So. Okay, welcome back, listeners. A lot of views on episode 1.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Really, episode 1, I did not expect that many views, so it was really cool. 150, 180 on Spotify, and then randomly checked Apple, and over 450 or something like that, 480 or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Crazy.
Yeah, so shout out to everybody. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Today, like I said, we're talking about goals, goal setting. For the most recent Forward Forever cycle, every 6 weeks there's a new cycle. I always do a deep dive. Mm-hmm. And with that deep dive, it's just a couple weeks of studying, research, and then me, doing a deep dive where I go really into the weeds of a very specific topic. So in the past, I've done alcohol, sleep, habits, and now this time was goal setting. Now, I want to preface this by saying that a ton of the information that I got here was due to Eric Trexler's work when he was with Stronger by Science. And so if you're curious about learning more, that is an article that I would highly recommend. They have a podcast on it, but if you type in Stronger by Science goal setting, you'll be able to find the article, and that was very pivotal for the research on not only my deep dive, but for this podcast as well. It was, it's a beast of an article. I had you glance through it.
I think I got through 70% of it. It's great.
It's phenomenal. And it really lays out a lot of strategies. And so then for the Forward Forever people, I kind of took my own route on everything that was said there. I looked through every single study that Eric mentioned, and then a few that he didn't. And then I also set up an interactive kind of quiz for the people that are doing or that are in Forward Forever. And so they will learn how to, set a goal hierarchy, create their own. And it's a step-by-step process. So really excited about that. It was obviously a lot of work. It took me, I was pretty stressed.
Yeah.
The last week.
Yeah. I'd say
2 weeks. It was pretty intense. I told Maddie well, whatever. We're through it now, and I think it'll benefit a whole lot of people. So
definitely.
How's the last week been for you?
It's been good. I feel like it's kind of flown by.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first week of a new calendar year is always a little crazy at work, post-holiday. So lots going on there. But other than that, it's been good.
Yeah.
How's yours been?
Well, you started your Instagram account.
No, I did. Yeah.
At Meals with Maddie.
Yeah. That's been really fun. First video was posted, 2 days ago now?
Yeah.
Day and a half ago? Yeah. And it's been great. Lots of support. So thank you for that. More to come on that.
Over 400 followers.
Yeah.
Day 1.
Yeah.
Insane.
It's pretty crazy.
And to the people that stuck around to the end of the podcast and followed her when we shouted it out before there was even one single post.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. There was 30 or 40 followers, and blank account, essentially.
That's how we knew that people were listening to the end of the podcast. Because it was in the last minute 30.
Right. It was definitely the send off.
Yeah.
On that last podcast.
So pretty cool. So thanks everybody.
Yeah. Definitely more to come. It's early days on that, but
you have so much scheduled. So you have so much planned.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah. I'm excited.
I don't do my content like that. I don't come at it with structure, a plan, the back training tip that I posted today. It was, if you hear our dog, sorry, people are going by outside. It's Leo. It's the big one, 80-pound golden retriever. For those of you who don't follow me on Instagram. Yeah, the back training Planet Fitness thing today. We were just there today, and I was like, hey, here, take my phone, grab it, and then I post it, a couple hours later. So I'm more of a fly-by-night kind of.
Yeah. See, for me, if I didn't have some sort of plan, I just wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Which I think is kind of a fun setup for this topic of goal setting, because
actually, that's a really good segue. Yeah.
It's very topical. There's a lot of things that work for one person but don't necessarily work for another, and I think we're really good examples of that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's get into it then, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so today I'm just going to go through a quick topic overview of what we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be talking about a goal hierarchy. We will break that down into quite a bit of depth. We're going to be talking about something called multifinality and maybe even equifinality, if I can remember what that one was about. Approach versus avoidance goals. And that one's really, really, really powerful. I think that's one that, if you're just now tuning in, I think you should stick around for that part and then I don't know, maybe just skim through the rest. Rigid versus flexible goals, very important. Process versus outcome. I think a lot of people are familiar with that. Focus on, don't worry about the outcome. Focus on like what you're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, that one I actually find really interesting.
Yeah. And then, slack with the cost. That principle, I think that's very important. Mental contrasting. And then finally, SMART goals. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with SMART goals. And that's kind of like that's always been the framework for, just goal setting in general. I think a lot of people are always thinking like, okay, yeah, SMART goals, that's what we do. Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely. And that acronym, some of those words change. So if you're like, whoa, what did I say? Timely? Maybe it's time-based to you.
Time bound. Yeah. There's a couple different.
Sure. Yeah. But it doesn't ultimately matter that much. They're the same principles. And so, we're going to give you some fun facts about that. And we're going to tell you why SMART goals are maybe not so smart.
Yeah.
All right. Should we talk about SMART goals first?
Should we talk about our goals for the year?
Yeah, we said we were going to do that on episode 1, and then
that was supposed to be our
we kind of mentioned it, but
do you want to talk about any goals that we have this year or that you have?
One that was so funny that I missed in the last episode that I realized I missed was I said, laid out a few social media goals and business goals and things like that. But one of them I didn't mention that I do have written down is that I want to record 30 podcast episodes. And how crazy that I didn't mention that on the podcast.
Right.
And I also want to bring in 15 guests. That's a potentially lofty goal because you can get guests easier if you have a bigger audience. For example, Joe Rogan, Andrew Huberman. I'm going to leave my opinion. You know what? No, I'm going to say this. And maybe people won't like that I'm saying this, but I'm going to say this. Andrew Huberman, I want to like him. I think I do like him as a person. But the quality of guests that he has on in some areas is so... I'm going to try not to swear because I don't want to have to mark these episodes as explicit. But they are so bad. Dr. Robert Lustig was on one of his most recent podcasts talking about how just a bunch of BS. And that also brings me to the point, and this is another kind of like tangent or side note. Don't get your nutrition information from a Netflix documentary. There's a new Netflix documentary out there, and it is just rife with misinformation. And somebody actually messaged me and said, well, why don't you do a debunk video about it? And I would love to, but I mean, the content that I make is unpaid. Yes, the content may lead to sales, which is great. That's the entire reason that I post on social media, in addition to helping people, which is important.
Right.
But I have to make money. Otherwise, I couldn't help people. If I were to try and debunk a 2.5 hour, the amount of research and time that would go into that, I told Maddie, people would have to pay me a couple $1,000.
Yeah.
For to make sense. I just have a whole lot on my plate. Anyway, are there any goals that you want to talk about? Like the podcast was one that I forgot about from last week, but
yeah, I mean, I mentioned some of the big ones I have about like working out consistently, things of that nature, like really putting an emphasis on hitting those like 3-ish workouts per week because I get a little flaky on that.
Yeah, I would say you definitely get a little flaky on that. But since we've been going to Planet Fitness, you've been loving it.
Turns out I like going to the gym significantly more than I like working out at home. Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah. And I didn't think I was that way. I was so excited to have a home workout or like a home gym.
Yeah.
And now that we have one, I rarely use it.
Well, but you did when we first.
Yeah. Just getting out of the house is really good for me, I think. And it definitely makes it feel like I have to go do that.
Yeah.
Versus I can push it off when it's right outside my front door.
For sure.
So.
Any other goals you want to talk about?
Yeah. So now that Meals with Maddie is live, I can kind of mention a little bit more. I have some social media related goals that are really just growing that account and being consistent with it, sticking with it, and kind of seeing where that goes. I have ideas, but we're still really in like the very early days of that. So lots of room to pivot and be really flexible with where that kind of ends up in the next year.
One thing I like that you mentioned is that you chunked out your goals into quarters.
Yes.
I thought that was really smart.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's something that's like frequently discussed when it comes to like goal setting, but for me, I look at my calendar year as like a quarterly, and that kind of gives me time to map out some like short-term goals or goals that are, I have for the next 3 months, but it also gives me a set in stone time where I'm going to reflect on what I've done in the last 3 months. And I'm going to use that to say like, okay, we're either doing really well or like this strategy that I was trying isn't working. So like, what do I need to pivot for the next 3 months in order to like make my overarching goal for the year a little bit easier.
Yeah.
So that like reflection time and ability to assess what I've already done, I think is really critical. And sometimes if you just have this like big goal without that set in stone time, you can kind of overlook.
You just kind of get lost in it.
Yeah, you kind of forget to reflect and like
see what's going right, what's going wrong. Do I need to change something up?
Exactly. It really helps me stay flexible.
Yeah. All right, now let's dive into the goal hierarchy. So if you are unfamiliar with the goal hierarchy, as I would assume most people listening are, I wasn't familiar with the goal hierarchy prior to maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago when I first listened to the podcast episode and then read the article by Eric Drexler when he was with Stronger by Science. Anyway, a goal hierarchy, there's a really, really good study for those who are curious about further information, and it's an open access, which is important, so you can see the whole research article without getting creative. This one you don't have to get creative to find. You can just Google it, and it is by Hoechley, and the O has a umlaut, the double dots over the O. So Hoechley et al. And he created a goal hierarchy, and I wish it was very easy for me just to like pop it up. You know what we need to have is like a
smart screen.
Yeah, like a smart screen or something right here. That'd be great. But anyway, it basically chunks out your goals into a hierarchy, kind of like a family tree of sorts. And at the top is your ideal self, or who you want to become. And then under that are qualities of what that ideal person or that future version of you or that best version of you has. So in the example here, it is ideal self at the top. And then the researchers gave an example of be healthy. So my ideal self is healthy. That's called your superordinate goals. That is the very highest level. The next level is your intermediate goals. These are goals that support some of those qualities of your person, of your ideal self. And at the bottom, there are subordinate goals, subordinate. So we have superordinate, intermediate, subordinate. And subordinate goals, I would say these are most in line with SMART goals.
Yeah.
These are the process-oriented, these are the nitty-gritty daily, weekly actions. And so basically the way this pans out is, we're going to backtrack a little bit, superordinate, ideal self. Right at the top, right beneath that is still a superordinate goal, but it is an example of be healthy. Okay, if I want to be healthy, I'm going to pick maybe 2 to 4 intermediate goals that support that. And again, I'm just copying what is in the researchers' examples, but there could be infinite examples of every step of this. But in order to be healthy, maybe I need to be in good physical shape, get enough sleep, avoid stress, eat a healthy diet. Those are definitely things, but they're not very actionable. Like, okay, get enough sleep. That's relatively actionable, but I feel like we could, kind of drill into that a little bit more.
Right.
Or like eat a healthy diet. I think we can kind of dial that in a little bit and almost personalize it a little bit more.
Exactly. You're kind of lacking the like specifics in that step.
Exactly. So, and for like being in good physical shape, I don't necessarily love the examples that these people gave, but hey, they're goal setting and behavior researchers, not exercise physiologists.
Sure.
we're gonna gloss over that really quick. But the examples they gave were exercise once a week, do 40 push-ups on Wednesday afternoon, and go to yoga Thursday at 4 p.m. Now, again, glossing over the fact that you probably wouldn't get in great physical shape if you did those three specific
Sure.
things. I think it's just more illustrating the example of like, okay, exercise once a week. That is very actionable. And then I love that they did do 40 push-ups on Wednesday afternoon. So it was, they really laid out not only, I think one thing that really helps with consistency is scheduling things out.
Definitely.
And I talk about that formerly with one-on-one clients and now with like Forward Forever and Train Hero members or the 18 members. And I try to highlight the importance of putting things on your calendar. And I used to tell this to clients all the time. One of the best ways to stick to an exercise program, put in your calendar and treat it as important as a doctor's appointment, an appointment that you cannot miss. Maybe instead of a doctor's appointment, because I mean, I'm not saying to miss your doctor's appointment, but like make it more important. What would be more important than
Your
that?
hair appointment.
Oh, you know what I was thinking? As like, you have a winning lottery ticket and you have to show up to cash that ticket in at a specific time.
Yeah.
But hair appointment is like right there between that and Mega Millions. It's like neck
I'm
and
just
neck.
thinking like, I'm not missing a hair appointment.
Sure.
A doctor's appointment.
Hey, I know I have this abscess that's causing me excruciating pain, but can I catch you next week?
Yeah, my roots look really bad.
That's good. Okay, so as we move through goal hierarchy from the top to the bottom, we are kind of going downward in degree of specificity. So actually, I should say the inverse of that. We are increasing specificity as we go further down. And then I'll say a little bit of priority as well, because while it's maybe if you miss yoga Thursday afternoon, that is not the end of the world. But if all of a sudden you decide, hey, I'm not interested in being healthy anymore. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big mood shift all of a sudden. If
It's
you are
pivot.
changing, I mean, that's like when like a 40, 50-year-old man goes through a midlife crisis and decides like, I'm not that guy anymore. I'm going to go buy a Ferrari, knowing well that he can't really like afford a Ferrari, but he's kind of like just freaking out about himself. Yeah, that would shatter. So the priority does decrease as you go down. Obviously, it's still important to do those subordinate goals, but really the reason that we're doing them is for the highest level.
Yeah. Before we like move on from the goal hierarchy, one thing I think is really nice about this layout is like you're always building up towards this ideal self.
Yeah.
So you can have as many superordinate goals that kind of get there as you want. So like you don't have to pick be healthy and like that's the only be healthy is the superordinate in this example. You don't have to like ignore any other ones. Like you could have another one that's just like be happy or be productive,
financially independent.
Yeah. So like I like that idea of having multiple goals that allow you to achieve that ideal self.
Yeah.
And kind of like laying them out all at the same time.
Well, I think it's like a family tree, and with my family tree, I mean, there are so many branches. And that's the same thing you can do here is you can set up a ridiculous amount of branches here.
Not that I'm advising you to have 500 goals going on at the same time.
No.
But
it might be well, and I think it's also important that like you can prioritize certain goals at certain times, and just because some goals are on the back burner at a very specific time doesn't mean that that's not a quality of yourself. Like if I didn't go to the gym for a week, it doesn't mean that I'm not interested in being healthy or being like in good physical health or that I don't care, et cetera, et cetera. It's like that is who you are. And I think one thing that I did when I was going from high school to college, in high school I was kind of a slacker, and I don't think many people would call me disciplined. And then I went to college, and people always say like, oh, it's a great time to reinvent yourself. And so I'm not gonna lie, not much changed. I thought I was going to reinvent myself. And I was like, I'm going to start going to the gym. And I was still pretty scared of the gym at that time. My buddies, John and Bennett, were trying to get me in late high school. And then, we went to different colleges. And so I just, was still pretty self-conscious about all that, anxious about all that. It was after my freshman year, I went to Elma College. And then After that, I transferred to Saginaw Valley State University, and it was there that is when I really started to change. And it was like I just was kind of sick of my own BS. And I started lifting a lot. I started becoming like the gym guy. People started seeing me and being like, well, that guy's very disciplined.
Mhm.
And it was really just because I didn't want to be that guy anymore. So I changed what my ideal self was
Mhm.
and started just doing things that I thought, okay, what would Alex do if he was ultra confident, if he
Mhm.
was like in really good shape, if he was very disciplined? And I just started doing those things. I mean, the fake it till you make it line is that we're going to go through that on mental contrasting, but
Mhm.
it is very apt
Mhm.
with when it comes to a goal hierarchy. All right. I do want to say before we get into the drilling down superordinate goal, I read, and I told you about this, probably the worst study I've ever read in my entire life in terms of quality studies. And it was by, I'm so sorry. I'm really, really sorry for saying this. I mean, I don't even want to like say the author. I'm going to quote this person's study, but I barely want to say it because I'm saying how bad of a study it was. However, credit where credit is due. Gail Matthews of the Department of Psychology at Dominican University of California, take a bow. In 2007, she released a study that was, let me go through the details of it. So the research design, there were 267 participants only, and they were recruited from businesses, organizations, and business networking groups. Only 149 participants actually completed the study. Participants aged and ranged from 23 years old to 72 years old, with 37 males, 112 females. And they came from the US, Belgium, England, India, Australia, Japan, yada, yada, yada. There were 5 different groups. Group 1, just think about your goals. Groups 2 through 5 were asked to write down their goals, and they varied in what they were supposed to do along with that. Group 3 was asked to do action commitments. 4 was asked to action commitments and send their goals in or to a supportive friend. Group 5 was asked to action commitments, send their goals and action commitments to a friend, and then do weekly progress reports to that friend.
Mhm.
And so they were kind of seeing like, okay, what really matters here? You
Right.
know, anytime there's and then group 1, they didn't write down their goals at all. They were just told, think about them.
Mhm.
So anyway, like I said, not the best study I've ever seen done.
Okay.
I mean, and I'm not a guy to critique studies that brutally, but this one was really, really low quality. But anyways, it fits our bias, so I'm going to say it anyways. The groups 2 through 5 who did write down their goals were 50% more likely to achieve their goals than the group that didn't. So again, on this podcast and just like us in general, I guess more me, I never want to take one study and run with it and say like, oh wow, okay, writing your goals instantly makes you 50% more likely to achieve it. However, it does fit my bias, and really it just ties into this podcast so well that we're going to rock with that. So write down your goals.
That's also like that's one thing that it's not like a big lofty endeavor to have to do. Writing
No,
down your goals is
no.
probably a good habit.
Yeah, I mean it's so small and really
Sure.
just like kind of keeps you locked in,
Yeah.
eyes on the prize. I did tell clients to either write it on a sticky note and then like stick it somewhere that is you see every day,
Mhm.
or a dry erase marker on your mirror. Could be a
Mm.
really good idea.
Mhm.
Anyway, we're gonna move past that study. Sorry, Gail, and move into another study as we talk about superordinate goals. So in 2010, in a 2010 study, participants who thought about why vitamin intake is important for them increased their vitamin intake over 2 weeks compared to participants who didn't think about why it was important. And that is a study by, do you want to try to pronounce that name?
No.
I'm really sorry to the author. He's not listening to this, or she. Chetzi Serantis et al., 2010. And so why does that matter? Well, a goal has to have meaning for us to stick to it. If I asked you to move a pile of bricks, if I said, hey, I'm not even going to call it a group fitness class. If I just called 10 friends and was like, meet me at the football field. And they're like, okay, why? I said, nope, no explanation. Like, all right, maybe 7 of them show up.
Sure.
If they're not getting a reason for
Sure.
why, they'd have to be pretty good friends to show up. Then if I say, okay, there are 100 bricks here. I want you to move them one brick at a time across the football field.
Mm-hmm.
I think I have like 3 friends that come to mind that would just start doing it, no questions asked.
Yeah.
But I still think the majority probably would be like, why? Why are we are you okay? Do we need to call Maddie? You know, like, are you good?
Yeah. My first thought for some reason jumped to like a survivor challenge.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that is.
Right. Yeah, $1 million on the line.
Yeah.
Sure. Immunity at the next tribal council.
Exactly.
The tribe is not speaking. If people don't watch Survivor here, none of that is going to make sense.
You should tune in.
Well, I'm assuming everybody watches Survivor.
Yeah, you should tune in. Next season, I think, starts in February.
Does it really?
I think so.
Season 46?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Jeff Probst, shout out. All right, so the example I'm trying to say here is that it's really important to have a why behind anything that you're doing. And that's kind of the beauty of a superordinate goal, is it's so directly tied to your ideal self and who you want to become that as you create a goal hierarchy, you never really have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? You know, I think we can go to the gym 3-4 times a week, or we can do a work task, or we can budget money, or we can, you know, spend our time, I don't know, volunteering or something like that. And it might be easy for those negative thoughts to come in. And it's like, what's the point of this? You know, especially if you're doing a weight loss, you know, pursuit, and you're hungry and you're tired and you just want to eat, you know, whatever you want again. It's really easy to say, like, why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
But if you think back to actually, why am I doing this? And it's, to become that person that, you know, I envision I can be and I want to be, it does kind of anchor it and make it a little bit easier.
Definitely.
So when you're setting a superordinate goal, which again, top of the goal hierarchy, it's a characteristic or quality that you want to have. It's like it's a pillar of your ideal self. It's something that that person has no matter what. You know, even if we're dealing with work stress, family stress, any of that stuff, and maybe our goals kind of go to the wayside a little bit, we're still drifting back, and, you know, it's magnetic. So these should emulate who you want to become, and they're very broad. Be healthy, be happy, be financially independent. I don't know. Do you have any other ideas? What would, outside of being in really good shape and having a lot of money, what would somebody ever want? Being a good parent.
Yeah.
Being a good friend. You know, like, think really broad. And when people think of goals normally, I think we're so drilled in with the SMART goals that thinking that broad would almost seem counterproductive.
Right. It almost seems like that's too big. So, like, what does it even mean?
Yeah, because I can't chunk that out.
Right.
Well, yes, we can.
Yeah.
And we're going to figure out how to next with intermediate goals. So these are directly below the superordinate goals. These are relatively specific, at least a bit more specific, and they're relatively measurable in terms of kind of looking at a before versus after. And really, they're just here to break one of your superordinate goals into kind of chunk it out into a little bit easier. So if your superordinate goal was be healthy, all right, what kinds of things go into being healthy? I probably need to exercise more. I probably need to get enough sleep. I probably need to manage stress. I probably need to
pay attention to your diet.
Yeah, pay attention to diet, have meaningful relationships. I think like mental health goes in with physical health and just health in general. So yeah, I don't know if I already mentioned sleep, but I'm going to mention it again because sleep is extremely important.
It's so important.
We should do a podcast on sleep.
I could talk about sleep all day long.
Okay, go. Right now.
Let's save it for another time.
Okay. All right. And then next, at the bottom of the goal hierarchy, we have subordinate goals. And these are at the very bottom. These are short-term. They're tasks. They are action-based. And they should support the achievement of your intermediate goal. And if you are listening and you're like, dang, am I just showing up to this podcast for definitions? No, I promise there will be a payoff. We will help you get your own goal hierarchy pretty soon here. Yeah. All right. So these should be things like, let's say it's improving physical fitness was our intermediate goal. Some subordinate goals to that could be go for a daily 15-minute walk. Very actionable. lift weights using either Forward Forever or the A-Team training program with a 7-day free trial and only $27 a month, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. But you can move those around on the calendar and you can choose any workout any day of the week. All right. Other ideas, if you're trying to develop a balanced diet, some subordinate goals for that would be, maybe every Sunday, you plan out your weekly meals and create a grocery list and go grocery shopping, or incorporate protein and fiber with each meal. I think it's a really good idea to kind of portion out your protein targets. So let's say somebody had like a target of 120 grams, shoot for 30 grams or 40 grams, 3 or 4 times per day.
Right.
That can be a really good way of doing it. When you are making your subordinate goals, you may realize, okay, well, one of my intermediate goals was have a balanced diet. And another one was, I don't know, be in good physical fitness, be in good physical shape. If I were to have the subordinate goal of hit a daily protein goal of 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, use goal body weight if you have 30 more pounds to lose roughly. I always add that in just because there are people out there that are 250, 300 pounds and they're like, do I really need to eat 240 grams of protein a day? No, chill. It's based on lean body mass. So yeah, take that with a grain of salt. But anyways, if I had that, like hit a protein goal per day or every day, that subordinate goal would support multiple intermediate goals. And that's something called multi-finality. I don't think you necessarily need to know that, but 2 birds, 1 stone. I think that's, just know that when you're creating a goal hierarchy, you're going to see a lot of this overlap. That's normal. That's expected. That's a good thing. So don't feel like you can't use one subordinate goal for multiple things. If anything, it might kind of anchor it, make it more important, make it more like, shoot, this was good for my nutrition side of things and my physical fitness side of things. Maybe it'll help me sleep better, depending on what we're talking about here. I think going for a daily walk. I mean, that's going to support your physical health. That's going to support your mental health, definitely. I mean, there are just a lot of things that go into a daily walk. Okay. Do you have anything to say so far?
I don't think I have anything to add on multi-finality.
Okay. Go ahead and talk for like 10 seconds because I'm going to take a sip of water.
Okay. One thing about multi-finality, I will just jump in on that, I guess. If you have a subordinate goal that is going to touch on multiple things, I think it's also a really good way of knowing like you're kind of on track to like really achieve that like ideal self.
Yeah,
because
totally.
You're fighting these things that bubble up in a really big way. They're touching on a bunch of things that you want to become or idol.
Yeah, become. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot my word.
That was a great addition. I'm glad I took a sip of water. All right, next up. Approach versus avoidance goals. So we don't have kids.
No.
If
we have 2 dogs.
We have 2 dogs. And actually, when we tell Rosie, lately, when we've told Rosie, how old is she?
She's like 6 months now, maybe.
Months. Yeah. When we tell her that it's time for bed, she starts running away.
Yeah.
Because she doesn't want to go to bed. She always falls asleep quickly, but she's just having so much fun out here that she doesn't want to be put in her crate. But anyways, whether you do have kids or you don't, let's go ahead and imagine what would happen if you told a kid, hey, you can't have candy right now. What's going to happen?
Right. Even if candy wasn't on the table at that moment, even if it wasn't on their minds.
It was not brought up until that moment. You just walked up to a kid and said, you cannot have candy for 5 minutes. I think, personally, that kid would want candy more than anything else because you just put it at the top of their mind. Unfortunately, that behavior of wanting something that you cannot have, it really doesn't change much in adulthood. And I'm going to say barely at all. I think that's a pretty common thing of like, okay, the Meta Quest 3. I have wanted one of these. It's a VR headset and I thought I was going to get it for Christmas, if I'm being honest. And then I didn't. And I mean, I've been looking at reviews for different games. I've been looking at, should I buy it? Should I not buy it? And I haven't bought it, but I will say that it has been on my mind like so much. And so where I'm going with this in a goal setting kind of framework is we should choose approach goals rather than avoidance goals.
Mhm.
Avoidance goals are kind of negative by their very
Yep.
nature. If we are doing, let's say it's nutrition based, and I said, hey, I don't want you to eat any more, I'm not going to say the J word, junk. I don't like saying that. I don't like saying that word. I don't like dichotomizing food in that way.
What's so funny is I didn't even know what you were going to say when you said the J word.
I'm sure a lot of people were like, what J word?
Yeah, that's really funny.
Anyway, but if I said like you can't have, junk food anymore, again, I don't like saying it. Please don't call food junk or like healthy or,
Right.
food exists on the spectrum of
Mhm.
more or less nutrient dense and more or less satiating, and you can work within this spectrum. So by dichotomizing a food, this is a tangent, but by dichotomizing food and calling it like junk or bad or stuff like that or unhealthy, it's like you're kind of totally missing
Mhm.
what's really going on with food. And a lot of the foods that people say are junk are really just hyper palatable, like they're delicious and you could eat
Mhm.
a lot of it, but that doesn't mean it's bad for you. There are very few foods that are actually bad for your health when consumed in moderation, and you're
Right.
hitting, appropriate calories, energy intake, and you're hitting a protein target, and you're hitting your fiber targets. Eating a bowl of Frosted Flakes isn't going to make me less healthy.
Mhm.
Not to mention, and this is another tangent, cereals are so heavily fortified. So many people think that cereals are bad for you.
Mhm.
Look at the ingredient label. And
Right.
that could take me a whole other thing. So many people are like, oh, if you can't pronounce, yada, yada, yada. It's like we're looking at the chemical composition of things. We won't be able to pronounce
Right.
99% of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I can barely pronounce normal
I
words.
mean, if I should put out a post that's like dihydrogen monoxide is going to kill you. And people be like, what is dihydrogen monoxide in? Well, it's water,
Right.
but I think it's very easy for people to be really worried about those
Mhm.
specific terms. But anyways, going back to approach versus avoidance goals, kind of got on a little tangent there. Instead of thinking about something like, oh, I can't have this food, or I need to stop being lazy, or something like that, whether we're specifically or broad, I can't go to that restaurant anymore or order that food anymore. Instead, what I would encourage you to do is, how about you include 2 servings of fruit every day,
Mhm.
or try to eat more of this.
Mhm.
That is a much healthier way and a much
Right.
healthier mindset to go about this stuff. In a study from 2020 by Oscarson and colleagues, it showed that most people who had mostly fitness oriented resolutions were significantly more successful with approach oriented results compared to avoidance oriented resolutions. So, just another study to kind of back up what we've been saying. Next, rigid versus flexible goals. So, these are, I need to exercise 4 times a week.
Mhm.
And if I exercise 3 times a week, I'm going to be very upset because I didn't meet my goal. Alternatively, if I'm like, I want to exercise somewhere between 2 to 4 times per week,
Mhm.
and I do 3 times, wow, now I'm feeling pretty dang good about myself.
Right.
And so it's, we can keep this one pretty brief, honestly. A rigid versus flexible approach has been studied, and, really shocking. The rigid approach increases odds of things like eating disorders, worse mental health, poorer body image. This was actually a study by Eric Helms. Are you familiar with him?
Loosely.
Okay, yeah. The people who are in the like kind of more of the fitness world, especially the scientific fitness world, you'll
Mhm.
definitely know Eric Helms. One way that I like utilizing these kind of more flexible goals is, a lot of people will say like, oh, I need to eat 1,700 calories. And we touched on this in our phallus episode last week about how, on days you don't want to be in a deficit, maybe just don't be in a deficit and eat up
Mhm.
closer to maintenance or somewhere in that range. And so one thing I always like doing is, instead of saying like, okay, you have to eat 1,700 calories, give a plus minus 100,
Right.
1,600 to 1,800. Now we got a whole lot of real estate to work with. Same thing with a protein minimum.
Yeah.
Don't worry about 120 grams. Shoot for 100 grams. Anything above that, totally fine.
Right. I was going to say, I think this is also really important when you're like working towards a goal that's newer to you.
Mm.
If this is something that you've done in the past and you're kind of expanding on it, you might have a little bit more discipline in that area. But if this is something that's brand new to you, like kind of view it as like a baby steps, allow yourself a little bit more flexibility. And I think that you'll feel a lot more motivated
Yeah.
and like capable
Yeah.
of achieving that.
Yeah. You build that confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And maybe see, if you start off as a new goal, start seeing it as an experiment,
Mm-hmm.
and just kind of seeing like, okay, well, maybe that didn't go so well. It doesn't mean I'm a failure. It just means that
Right.
that's not the specific, way for me to do that
Right.
thing.
Again, this comes back to the quarterly check-ins that I think we should all be doing. It's a great way to be more flexible.
It's funny that you mentioned that. I actually look at like my day as quarters,
Yeah.
if like so many people, that start off their day and, oh, my whole day is ruined, or you just,
Right.
something like that. And that can be a really negative way. It's like, okay, you're going to let that thing affect your entire day. Now, some things, I mean, if you get into like a car crash, you
Right.
can't just hit
We're
9
not rebounding
9
right
a.m.,
away.
10 a.m. and I'm being like, all right, fresh slate, because that's going to
Right.
carry on. You got to worry about the repairs and, everything else. But if it's just something like, oh, somebody said something that kind of rubbed you the wrong way, just try to reset as fast as possible. The faster you reset, the better you're going to be off. The better you'll be because of it. All right, next, process versus outcome goals. So I think this is one that most people are familiar with.
Yeah, I actually think this is really interesting because there are definitely, well, let's explain it first,
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah. A process goal might be, or well, I should say an outcome goal might be something like, okay, I want to lose 10 pounds or I want to bench press 185 pounds. And maybe the downside to that is, one, you're kind of always looking at the end of the track rather than looking at what's the next step. And then, like, let's say, okay, you get there, you're at the very end, you get to celebrate that achievement one time.
Right.
That's it. Because that's all you're focused on is me hitting my end goal. And you're not really like relishing in the process. I think one of the most common phrases in fitness is like fall in love with the process. And while overused, I definitely do agree with it. You do have to fall in love with the process. So instead of, okay, I need to lose 10 pounds, that could be an intermediate goal for sure. That could be an intermediate goal. And then now let's think about the processes that it takes to get there.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
where the subordinate goals come in. And it's like, okay, what would I have to do to lose 10 pounds? Well, I have to be in a calorie deficit. I'm going to say the majority of the time, if we're in a weekly calorie deficit,
Sure.
Great. You can be at maintenance some days. You might even be able to be in a surplus some days, as long as, the net weekly average is a deficit. That's going to go a long way. But even beyond that, move more, eat less that is the principles of it. But then how do we set up the processes for that specific person? Is it, okay, we hit 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 steps. All right, maybe we get them a walking pad or something like that. Okay. Maybe we get them to lift weights so that they are building muscle and losing body fat, simultaneously, or at least retaining muscle while losing body fat. Maybe we are increasing their fiber intake so that they're not so hungry. That would help them lose 10 pounds. Maybe it is teaching them about, different macronutrients and different, high satiety foods. Like potatoes are very, very highly satiating. I think number one on the satiety index from 1973.
I don't know the date on that.
Let me check that. 1995. I don't know why I said 1973. Anyways. Yeah. Well, if you're curious about the satiety index of common foods, just Google exactly that, and then you'll be able to find it. It's 1995 by S.H. Holt. All right. So yeah, outcome versus process. Did I cover that already?
Yeah. But I do think it's really interesting because, the kind of advice here is to focus less on like the outcome goals, focus on your process goals. What's funny is I use a lot of outcome goals. I use them primarily to support like a process goal, or I'll come up, like you said, using that as like your intermediary goal and then coming up with your process. And, that's kind of what I do. But like one area, and we both actually do this, is our reading goal. Our reading goal is always a number of books per year.
Yeah.
Versus a process goal of I want to read every day or every other day or something like that.
So you might not know this, but on my app that I have, TickTick, I have a daily habit that's read 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I can just check that off anytime it's done.
Yeah.
So I did set up that outcome goal with a process goal.
Yeah. But that's kind of what I was going to say is like you can kind of use those outcome goals while they might not necessarily need to be the focus, but I do kind of like using them as a way of measuring
milestones
and stuff like that. For
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Next is the principle of slack with a cost. So in last week's episode, you had mentioned some of the best fat loss advice that I have ever given was don't eat in a deficit on days you don't feel like it, and just eat up to maintenance. And the wisdom that I was imparting,
Very wise.
the wisdom I was imparting upon you was the principle of slack with a cost. And it is, sure, you can be in a 300, 400, 500, 600 calorie deficit per day, or if you need it, you can eat that extra 300, 400, 500, 600 calories and stick up to your maintenance. And yes, if you stick to your initial calorie target, which is the bigger deficit, then you will lose fat at a faster rate and you'll be in your fat loss for less time. However, some days maybe we're more stressed, maybe we're just more hungry, maybe we just want to eat something, maybe we're out with friends, whatever it is, and we want to eat a little bit more. And that is the principle of slack with a cost. There was an interesting study about this. It was something about researchers brought in participants and they had them do 30 captchas. Captchas where it's like you got to type in like the weird words and stuff like that. They had them solve 30 of them.
Yeah.
And I wish I had the study pulled up right now.
It's actually 35 because I just read this study.
Oh, that's so funny. Nice job preparing.
Thank you.
Impressive. And yeah, within that, it was like one group was told you have to solve each one 7 times a week, 7 days a week, or do this 7 days a week. Another one was told. And so anyways, they basically just proved that slack with a cost is a really healthy way of, they had higher levels of retention and achievement when they gave them like the slack with a cost. It was like, well, I think it was something along the lines of like, well, technically, 7 is your goal, but if you get 5, that's okay too.
Right.
And those people they were just happier with that.
This also kind of ties in with like your flexibility too.
Yeah, definitely. It really does. And it's, maybe, okay, if your goals are 1,600 to 1,800 calories, 1,600, sure, I might lose body fat a little bit faster, but 1,800, man, that'd be nice today,
Right.
I do want to say that, like, we're talking a lot about like how lower calorie can help you go with faster fat loss. I don't want the listeners to take that out of context and think like I should always be going as low calorie as physically possible, because there is a point where too low of calories means you are going to be losing muscle in order to support the energy demands that you're, kind of using every day. So a bigger deficit is not always better. It's important to note that. Another way that you can do this is by doing some calorie cycling. So if you are unfamiliar with calorie cycling, it's basically like, okay, let's say we had a target of 2,000 calories per day, and we're like Saturday and Sunday, I want to go nuts. I'm saying I want to go nuts on Saturday and Sunday. What I could do is subtract 100 calories Monday through Friday. So now we have 500 calories banked up, and either put it all on Saturday to give me 2,500 calories, or we could put it on Saturday and Sunday, 2,250. We could even do that with maybe 200 calories per day, and now we got 1,000 calories banked up. We could do a 3,000 calorie Saturday or a 2,500 Saturday and Sunday. So always look at your calories as weekly averages and kind of move things around as needed. I probably wouldn't do too much more than a 200 calorie deficit if you are calorie cycling, just because it doesn't sound like too much, but it really adds up.
Yeah, especially if you've been in a deficit for a bit, sometimes dropping that calorie target even more is
probably unreal.
It can be a little just like mentally draining too.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we come to the principle of mental contrasting. So this is one of those things where you visualize the person that you are currently, and then you visualize the person that you want to become, the ideal self from the superordinate goal. And then you compare or contrast what is the difference between me and that person, the ideal version of me. And a lot of people, when they set goals, everybody probably should be doing this, but research has shown, by research, hold on, I'm pulling it up. Not going to say the first name, but just because I can't pronounce it, Wang and colleagues, a from 2021, a meta-analysis of the effects of mental contrasting with implementation intentions on goal attainment. Are you familiar with implementation intentions?
I would love for you to explain it.
Okay, they are basically, are you familiar with computer programming?
Yeah.
You know, if-then statements?
Sure.
If-then statements are, if X happens, then Y. You know, then the letter Y, not like WHY.
Yeah.
And so what this means is something like, another phrase for implementation intentions is habit stacking. James Clear of Atomic Habits, I'm pretty sure, was the one who popularized that idea. And he was like, anytime I want to listen to my podcast or my favorite podcast, I think he said Lowering the Barrier was his favorite podcast.
I bet he did.
Yeah, I think that's what he said back
I'm
then.
sure of it.
Yeah. Anytime I listen to my favorite podcast, I will go for a walk or hop on my treadmill or go cycling or do the dishes. And it's basically pairing one activity that you don't love with an activity you do love. And so I told one of my clients, they really liked watching their shows after work. And so I told them, I asked, do you have a TV in your gym, in your workout room? And they said, no. I said, can you put one up? Oh my gosh. They were like ready to shake my hand virtually. They thought that was the best idea ever. And so it's just like things like that, you know, you can just try to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great one.
It's just pair something that you don't like with something that you do like, and it goes a long way. All right. So that's implementation intentions, and now mental contrasting. So, anyways, I didn't finish that sentence, but Wang and colleagues found that mental contrasting can be more effective than positive visualization alone, as it prevents people from being overly optimistic without considering potential difficulties, therefore fostering a more prepared and determined approach to goal achievement. And so what this kind of looks like is in a few weeks, or maybe this month, maybe next month, I'm going to go talk to those high school kids. Very excited for the opportunity for that. But I'm going to go talk to them. And my brother was telling me that the teacher was having some students that were like, it's an entrepreneurship class. And the teacher said to my brother that there are some students that, okay, I'm just going to create a clothing brand, or I'm going to become an influencer. And then I'll be a millionaire and life will be so good. And what they're doing is they're kind of going A to Z without thinking about B through Y.
Right.
They're not thinking about the rest of the steps there. And so this is where mental contrasting comes into play, is not only thinking about where you are and then where you want to be, but thinking about the obstacles and like, hey man, this shit might get kind of hard. Like this might not be the easiest little thing. I know I just swore.
We're an explicit podcast now.
Now we are officially an explicit podcast. Damn it. I mean,
now
the floodgates are open now. All right. Anyway, so with mental contrasting, like I said, visualize the desired outcome, contrast with present reality, and then develop a plan. And I think this can be one of the most effective portions of when you are trying to set up your own intermediate and subordinate goals. You have to think about, okay, where am I at right now? What issues am I struggling with right now? And then how do I solve those things specifically? And so you can kind of have this really targeted approach by thinking about like, okay, if I want to get from A to Z, all right, what obstacles are going to be on the way? All right, I'm pretty low on time, so I'm going to have to find something that is pretty manageable for time. I am pretty stressed, so I'm going to either have to find out a way to make this low stress or to manage the stress that I currently have right now. You just think about obstacles, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then go ahead and solve for each. So yeah, I guess the last thing that we want to talk about is SMART goals, and this is going to be honestly pretty brief.
Yeah. SMART
goals, in my opinion, are lacking just because they don't tether you to the why. You can set a specific and measurable and attainable and realistic and timely goal. And actually, fun fact. But it's not tethered to a why, and that's really why that goal hierarchy is so important. Fun fact: SMART goals came from a corporate background. They were given by managers to employees to make sure that they would stay on task. And now I think a lot of fitness professionals have kind of stolen the SMART thing because, wow, it's a great acronym.
Yeah. And it's also just familiar to people.
Yeah.
Like so many people, especially those who do work in an office setting, like we're definitely familiar with the SMART goals.
Yeah.
So I think that's also where they come
That naming was on point. SMART goals. I mean, nobody's going to forget that. The dog's going again. Anyway, yeah. So the big drawback to them is they don't tether you to a why. And so I'm okay with you setting SMART goals, but maybe treat it as the very bottom of your goal hierarchy and then build upward. And for what it's worth, I would recommend starting from the top, picturing your, ideal self. Let's just go through this exercise. If you want to set up your own goal hierarchy, let's do it right now. First things first, mental contrast. Think about who you are currently, who you want to be. Leo's trying to get pets over by Maddie right now. Oh, he's on camera. Oh. He made it. He made it in the podcast, episode 2. Welcome, buddy. Anyway, so take a moment. Go ahead and pause the podcast if you're somebody who's going to be following along, because we're not going to pause here ourselves.
Sure.
But think about your ideal self. Spend 60 seconds doing that. What are qualities that they have? Are they healthy? Are they I'm going back to the same exact examples, but
sure,
you can decide who you are and who you want to be. Okay. Pause. All right. Unpause. Okay. Next. I don't need to say unpause. They will do that unless they just close out of the thing. Next, what you want to do is think about the obstacles from where you are right now to where you want to be. What's stopping you from getting there, and really list out the obstacles. List out every single obstacle, even if it feels kind of redundant. List out every single one. Next, set up intermediate goals that support that superordinate goals. Remember, these are the qualities that you thought of that your ideal self would have. Okay. For the intermediate goals, you want to solve the obstacles that you laid out. And then for the subordinate goals, set up process-oriented, approach-oriented tasks.
When it comes to when you're finally coming up with those lowest tier action points, one thing I would recommend is make one of them your absolute bare minimum, something that you can stick to basically every day.
Great
so
addition.
If your goal is to increase your steps, if that's one of your action points, and there are days that you're not going to be able to do a 15-20 minute walk, your bare minimum might be pacing around your house twice.
Yeah.
So I would always try and make
shoot
one
for a minimum.
Yes, that even on the days that you're the most swamped or the most overwhelmed or most stressed, and I'm not saying you can't miss a day.
Right.
I'm definitely not saying
absolutely.
that. But I would always try to think of your bare minimum, so you always have a little bit of motivation, something to come back to.
Yeah.
I think that can be really helpful.
Something that I like is, I love that you mentioned shoot for the minimum. That was one thing that I told my clients, you can get a lot of progress if you just commit to something that is so bare minimum. You think it's I could do that on my worst day.
Right.
I guess we'll leave it there, right?
I think so.
Okay. Well, if you liked, what a weird summary. What a weird conclusion. But that's it. We haven't nailed the conclusions yet because we're only on episode 2.
Yeah.
We'll get it eventually. Yeah. All right. If you want to support the podcast, please give us a 5-star review. Share it with your friends. If you want to screenshot it and tag us both at Alex Teamy Fitness and at Meals with Maddie, we would really appreciate it.
Yeah.
It means a lot and it really helps us grow this podcast. If you want to support us monetarily, Maddie doesn't have any paid products or anything like that, but I do. And that is Forward Forever, which the cycle as of the time of this posting will be closed. But the next one starts on February 19th. Registration for that will open up the week before. That is my training and nutrition program and education, I suppose, as well, with Danielle, the dietitian, as well as the A-Team, which is my training program, gets updated every 6 weeks. There are home gym and full gym options. And actually, both options, both teams, get access to both programs. So whether you are at a full gym or home gym, you get access to both for a low price of $27 a month, and that comes with a 7-day free trial. I guess one more thing is I'm affiliated by Macro Factor. So if you want to sponsor, support me in that way, using code Alex will get you a 2-week free trial, and I do get money for that. They unfortunately have not sponsored the podcast yet, but I'm going to be talking to Craig Knuckles about that shortly. I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. Not going to bother him with that. All right. We'll leave it there. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you guys soon.